And we're live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Agency Operators Podcast. My name is Pasha, and today I'm joined by Elizabeth Greene of Jungler. How are you, Elizabeth? Thank you for joining.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing really well.
Awesome. I'm really excited about this talk. I've seen you in the industry quite a bit on LinkedIn and social, and as really like the wizard and huge expert on PPC. I know that your agency is really specific on managing ads and nothing else, which makes you guys super hyper focused on that particular thing, which is a beast in itself, right? There's billions being spent on Amazon
Yeah.
advertising. It's taking over everything. So it's pretty cool to have a chat, just diving into what's working, what's not working. In our agency, we're also managing ads and we're seeing the trends over the years and how things are changing in the landscape. And PPC is really at the heart of that.
hmm
Before we dive into talking about strategy, ranking, and all of those things, I would love to hear a little bit about your story and how you became the owner of Jungler and the chief operator there. And how did you come into Amazon advertising or Amazon in general, wanting to be a marketer and all of that? What's your story?
Yeah. It's an interesting story. So I'll try and give you the condensed version of this. I like to say I fell into it and then I fell in love with it. There's a really there's enough straightforward data analytics, and I think that's really driven by the fact that primarily most ads these days, even if you're pushing a lot into sponsor brands and display, so the bulk of your ad spend is going to be made up of sponsored products, which is pretty cut and dry. There's really no creatives when it comes into sponsored products. It's really a function of the listing. So that one is really heavy on the data analytics, and yet there is still a to me, very exciting and dynamic creativity when it comes to determining how you should put in the settings, what things you can tweak, because sponsored products also has the most the most buttons or levers you can pull with it. So there's this really beautiful marriage between creativity, but then also not so focused on creativity or the creative to make the ads work. That I find it just insanely fascinating. And that's me jumping to the end of the story you asked about the beginning. So in the beginning, it really started how most people start off in this industry. Oh, I want to work from home. I want to find something to do that. Online is this whole beautiful world that affords massive amounts of opportunity and also massive amounts of options, which can feel very overwhelming when you're trying to get started. And so that's kind of where that sort of our venture into that, and of course through that led us to the world of selling on Amazon, and started off in doing a lot of retail arbitrage, which is a great way to get started. It's also something that you have to keep the plate spinning with, and so that becomes exhausting at a point. Also, when you have, I believe we had 4 children at that point, so dragging all the kids to the store, scheming things, that was a whole thing. That's exhausting. So, there's this new wonderful world of private label. Okay, let's do that. And so that sort of got us, I always liken it to, there's a lot of people who shop on Amazon who, there's still people out there who think it's being sold by Amazon, it's just Amazon. They don't realize that there's other brands. And then I think there's a more consumer awareness these days that these are brands that sell on Amazon. Less so back in the day, but really I liken it to going behind a curtain until you really get into the world of selling on Amazon. You're this is insane. I had no idea how many ourselves included now, right, have really grown up to help support sellers. And the one thing I love about the Amazon community in general, in this podcast being a great representation of that, is just how open Amazon sellers are to sharing information, and just really there's this genuine want to help. Now, if you're in private label, nobody shares products unless you have a very reputable consumer brand that it's pretty obvious there's a very wide moat around yourself. Everyone's going to stop at actually sharing the products, but up until sharing the specific products, tactics, strategies, ideas, up and coming things. There's not this like close to the chest, oh, I must guard this interesting secret that I found. There's a very much that sort of sharing dynamic. And so that was, kind of when we got into it. Free resources. I think the first thing that we watched was like Jungle Scouts, kind of how to sell on Amazon, like their free YouTube thing. And so started sourcing products and things like that. Life got in the way. I at some point got pregnant with twins. That was a whole thing in and of itself. Morning sickness was a beast. If everyone survived and ate, we consider that a win for the day, which of course, selling on Amazon, everyone here knows how much goes into that. And then of course that was like back burner, right? And so after sort of the dust settled a little bit, that whole probably over a year, because even after they came, you're still dealing with 2 newborns, which is a whole thing itself. I was a veteran by that point, but it's still a lot. And so getting back into it, we're like, okay, we're trying to pick up where we left off, right? My husband was working in the family business, really good, but I was at home with the kids. That was the life we wanted, and the life I still wanted, but there was this desire to have something that could be flexible, that he also could spend time at home with the family unit. That was really our driving force and still continues to be. And so getting back into it, that you're getting back into, speaking of everyone sharing and just real support system around Amazon sellers. Back then there was a lot of Facebook groups. I think a lot of that has moved on to LinkedIn these days, which is where I am mostly as well now. But so there was a lot of questions surrounding Amazon advertising, which of course, going back through what we'd gone through in selling, I had knowledge of. And so we people were asking questions. I've said this before, but like the dynamic back then was, should I run advertising? And if I do run advertising, what should that look like? There was very much, you could still do search, find, buys. There was a lot of ways to like rank products. Some people were still being able to like get up products and sell without having to run advertising on it. These days, I don't want to say that's impossible, but kind of is in a way. And so, but people with that were asking questions, and I have answers to those questions. And so therefore, let me help answer the question. And this was also back before it became as complicated as it is now. For context, in the kind of timeline of updates to Amazon advertising, this was before the 4 targeting types got split out in the auto campaigns and like blew everybody's minds. And how many millions of updates since then? It's like constant changes. It feels like they're coming at us a mile a minute and we have to adjust for them. But you had a little bit more reprieve, a little bit more time to figure things out. And so through just me answering those questions, and I remember like long Facebook thread comment sections, back and forth, and I'm just, in between doing dishes or whatever I'm doing. And so that led to someone saying like, oh, do you do this? And I was like, well, I guess I can, and I very distinctly remember, and to be honest, this still is my thought process in what we do with clients now, is just the immense amount of responsibility that clients place on us to help them figure out how to spend their dollars well. I distinctly remember a discussion my husband had with my brother-in-law, and they came back, and I was at the sink doing dishes, and my husband said like, I really think like we should make this a business. We should get into this industry. And my response was, I can't. I said, I'm going to be spending other people's money. That terrifies me. What if I'm not qualified? What if I'm going to do it wrong? It's immense amount of responsibility that I don't feel qualified for. And he said, no, we really need to do this. And I said, fine. And so for me, growing into where we are now, it's just been this constant focus on quality, focus on saying yes when opportunities come, and then leveling up my skill set to meet those opportunities, and just continuously trying to stay close to our roots of being helpful in where we can. And then that has led to, just kind of where we are in business. It just keeps getting better. It's pretty awesome.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I can totally see the responsibility of managing somebody else's money it goes so much deeper than that, because
Yeah.
people trust us with their livelihoods, right? Their families and everything in a way, right? Because like you said, Amazon is pay to play. So how
Yeah.
you pay is how you play. And if you're not managing that correctly, then that makes a big impact on, especially if they're relying on Amazon to pay all of their bills. Some people are full-time Amazon.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
it's a lot to carry. But I'm sure, coming from being a parent of 6, you guys are already primed for being super on top and responsible and focused. So this, I'm sure that just kind of translated over. And so that's how you're able to kind of manage everything together, the work-life balance of it all, right?
Yeah, it definitely has shaped a lot of my perspectives on things. I will say that. Um, having honestly, I couldn't imagine life any other way. And when we got started building our family, we kind of now have the life in which I always wished. Very large family. We called large. Six children, 8 total. Working together with the family. Me, I see leveling up my skill set. In business, in life, just personal growth, benefiting again anyone who I could possibly lend value to, which now has extended to, as my kids grow. My oldest is 13 going on 14. So now getting to teach her life lessons that I've learned, and just spring shot her. You hope with every generation you discard. I'm sure there's things that I do that she's like, oh my gosh, I'm never doing that with my kids. And then there'll be things that she's like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And then just kind of constantly trying to build off of that, which now also extends to kind of us building a team and sort of a substructure under that team, and just continuously, I think, just leveling up and finding a new level to play the game, and being really excited to just sort of develop the skills that are required to play on the next level.
Do you want your kids to be entrepreneurs as well?
I want them to know that they have choices. I think for a lot of them that may include entrepreneurship, but it may not. I think the thing that really defines the way that we have chosen to, again, just sculpt what our life looks like, has been, and this is something I will continue to, I think, work towards, is determining what you would like your life to look like and how you want to live it. And it is insanely hard to get quiet and focus in and reject sort of the intentional or unintentional sort of guilt or expectations that are put on you externally from others, from society or whatever, and then just focus on, and it is a lot of trial and error, right? You're never going to know everything, and you're not going to know what you want to do at 18, and that's not going to be the same thing. What I'm doing in my 20s was nothing like what I'm doing now in my 30s, and then eventually in my 40s, life will probably look a little bit different, and that's fine. But trying to, at least for me, it's been trying to get rid of the guilt complex that doesn't really need to be there, and realize life can be what I want it to be and how I want it to be. And nowadays there's so many options, and Amazon is definitely one of those options that affords, there's service providers, there's tool providers, there's sellers. I mean, there's just this entire ecosystem of opportunity surrounded by the company that's been built, which I think is amazing. And so I would just hope that for my own children to hopefully become a wise counseling voice that can help them hopefully work through all the things that I had to work through and shedding expectations, and help them more easily discover what that looks like for them. And then the different, I think, kind of seasons they'll probably go through.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think being an entrepreneur in general is about feeling like you have options, right? And I think it is the saying no sometimes is more important than saying yes, because there are opportunities
Yes.
everywhere. But not every opportunity is going to be fruitful. And over time, you learn, you make
Yeah.
mistakes, you have to fail. It's a road that's paved with many failures. Um, and also Amazon is just going to change too. We don't know what Amazon
Yes.
is going to look like in 5 years, 10 years. It's really quite unknown. there's all kinds of changes happening. Like you said, advertising's changing. There's word of Amazon getting involved in PPC and incorporating some kind of AI stuff, their own algorithms. Um, I have my own theories on that. I'm not too concerned about that. I think there's always going to be some level of control in our hands. But I'm sure some of your clients are complaining about some of these changes in a negative way in terms of like fees and the level of competition, and just CPCs are going up, and inflation probably plays a role in that too. So how are you guys dealing with a lot of these changes that are coming in right now? Are you kind of handling it fine, or there's some turbulence on the PPC side, and clients are getting upset about it? Like how do you guys handle that right now?
That's a good question. I think there will always be turbulence because there will always be changes, changes to the way that Amazon chooses to update their systems. For example, and this is honestly somewhat of an internal frustration for us. And I hesitate to bite the hand that feeds me in more ways than one, right? But there is this, unfortunately, again, small peon in the ocean of all that is Amazon. So my voice, I don't know if it's much to listen to on an authority, but if someone for Amazon was listening in, I would say the way in which they're rolling out a lot of their current updates, to be honest, is slightly frustrating. There seems to be a very real lack of transparency, and unfortunately I think what it's doing is it's sort of adding to the distrust that sellers have in the Amazon platform itself, so our Amazon advertising platform itself. And honestly, it's kind of like a catch 22. It's like you need to run ads to be able, it is really a pay to play in this day and age, unfortunately. And the reason why is because there's just so many options for buyers right now, which is phenomenal from a shopper perspective, right? We have so many options, and Amazon has done, I think, a very good job with their algorithm in that the things that sell best rise to the top. Now, that does create a frustration for a lot of new sellers because they're like, I feel like I should have my seat at the table too. And while I would agree with that, the thing is that there's a lot more options, and Amazon is requiring that everyone earn their seat at the table, which, to be honest, I think is in some ways fair when you think of it from a consumer perspective, right? New products, Amazon doesn't know if it's going to convert well. And so you have to have some sort of traffic and then conversions off of that traffic to help validate to Amazon this product does deserve a seat at the table. And so that's where ads come in. Ads can drive that traffic to at least get you the eyeballs to then make the conversions to prove to Amazon that, that's a very simplified view of it. But to be honest, I think that's how we should be thinking about advertising. It's driving traffic to help validate to the algorithm this product is, everything we hoped it would be, and shoppers are enthralled, and, it deserves a seat at the table. But the way in which they are rolling out updates is very much in the background, and what they're doing is they're making updates to things that always existed. So, for example, the most recent changes, and then also the change that I just got a notification of, again, it was like buried in a newsletter somewhere. A random update only went out to their Amazon advertising partner network. Was, by the way, we're going to be changing the way that dynamic up and down bidding functions only on the days of Prime Day. And we're telling you that this is to help with impressions, which is true. It will increase impressions, but on the other side of that, it's also going to increase costs, right? And so the way it is they're saying, okay, we're going to change the way that dynamic up and down bidding functions. So this is a thing that we always knew functions. We had, we validated through testing. To be honest, we don't use dynamic up and down very much in our agency, which, this kind of just validates that, like, there's been changes to it. But they're like, oh, we're going to change how this targeting type is going, or this bidding, this sponsored product strategy is going to work. And so, like, this is something that we always had. We knew how it works, and like, well, we're changing the game on it, right? And unfortunately, the updates or the announcements are not widely publicized, and also changes to the way match types have functioned. So sponsored products broad match always functioned much more selectively. We had more control over it than sponsored brands broad match historically. And a lot of advertisers, ourselves included, kind of opted to not even use broad match and sponsored brand ads because we didn't like the way in which the targeting functioned. We didn't feel like it was very efficient. We thought that there was a high waste for ad spend there, which is honestly true. And then they updated their the way that it works in sponsored product ads, so it mirrors sponsored brand ads now, the way that it always worked. And there was no announcement, there was no update to anything. The way in which a lot of these functions are rolling out is we're in the data, we're in the reports day in and day out. So is our entire team, and our team starts saying there's some very strange things happening here. Things that, because we know how this thing works, this should not be here, and yet it is here. So we go, we look across our entire accounts. Yes, we're validating. Okay. Then we go to other service providers that are good friends of ours. Are you all seeing this? Yes, we're correlating this. This is very strange. And then we go to Amazon and we say, okay, like there was no update on this thing. And we got no answer from any of the reps. Like we reached out to reps, or friends are reaching out to reps. Like everybody's like, what is going on? People are posting, it's going crazy. This was a while back since. And then there was a very quiet update to their documentation on their site. And that's how it's currently been going, is very strange things happening in search term reports, quiet update to documentation, no formal announcements, no publicizing, no anything, which again, I can see the focus in where Amazon is going, which unfortunately is taking a lot of the control back on the targeting for their algorithm. And I still am quite cynical of, that sort of movement or what I see happening there, which is very much the same progression that Google has had. If you keep an ear to the ground, again, we don't, as of right now, we don't run Google ads for clients, but we do. It is very much a good thing to keep a pulse on. There's some very interesting ideas that come out of Google pay-per-click that can be applied to some things that do not translate. So it's not like a one-to-one in strategy, but it's a good thing to keep an eye and keep a pulse on. And Google pay-per-click is very much ahead of where Amazon is currently. And so there are a lot of mirrors in the progression of the two platforms. And so it's not necessarily that these changes are being made. I think a lot of our frustration with these is it seems the perception is that it's very underhanded. And unfortunately, with a lot of these updates, the consequences of them have been an increase in ad spend or an increase in cost per clicks, and not always translating in a way that is efficient.
Yeah.
And I do really hope that Amazon gets a handle of it, because unfortunately I think what they're doing is they're really undermining the trust in the platform, unfortunately. And it's just because of the way, like the very sporadic ways in which, or the non-ways in which these things are like communicated to to advertisers and sellers alike. And so I do hope they change that, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I think the delivery needs to be worked on. There was a bit of a mess recently. We saw that this year. They implemented new fee. Then they said, oh, never mind, here's a credit. Everyone's upset, which is nice that they actually heard our voice and they kind of responded in some way. But I think that's also a learning experience for them, because they're also trying to adjust to the changing environment and landscape on a global level, how commerce is changing. So Amazon is always going to do what's in their best interest at the end of the day. We know that. And so we're playing on their turf. They're trying to create the illusion of, trying to have like neutrality, but it's not exactly true. They're trying to maximize as much as possible. That's why they do, hey, we're going to make this little tweak in advertising during the top sales days of the year, Prime Day, right? And we're going to kind of encourage you to spend a little bit more, because everybody else is going to be spending more. It's like we're racing, right, for the click, because it's like, that's your opportunity to get the rank boost or whatever it is. So I really like your concept where you're saying that ads are really there to drive validity and to verify to Amazon that you're eligible to sell on their platform in an efficient way, they're going to give you the visibility. So I have a couple questions on that. My
Yeah.
first question is going to be, does that also mean that at some point after advertising enough and getting enough sales velocity, then you don't really need to run PPC anymore? Like, could you push it to the point where they already want to give you so much visibility because you've been having such great conversion and so many years of history that you can just shut off your ads and you'll still do great, aside from the subscribe and save, just,
Mhm.
pure, the momentum of organic rank?
Maybe. And which is not a satisfactory answer for everyone. Everyone wants to hear you like, yeah, you totally shut off ads once you're ranking. You're like totally fine. You can sometimes, but the problem is it's not necessarily. So what I found the longer that I do this, is that the best practice is, although there's a ton of variables, like, oh my gosh, it's ridiculous these days, right? Best practices remain solid, 100%. And the actions that we take, all we're doing is we're moving around ad spend. I'm making it sound very simple. At the end of the day, the actual action is super simple. You go up, you spend more, you spend less. Oh, this is working well, put more ad spend here. It's working less, pull less ad spend here. The thing that is very complicated, and this feeds into the answer to your question, is to what degree do I go up or down? And that is the question that we are constantly asking and tweaking. And like we have a lot of like internal bid systems and like internal things that we've built that have worked really, really well. And we're constantly looking for ways like what's the next level to determine that sweet spot. And that's really what everybody's looking for, is for the sweet spot. The problem is that there's a lot of things out there that are like, oh, we're gonna do this whole AI analytics and we're gonna like, do this insane analysis and we're gonna tell you. They can't tell you. Nobody can tell you until you test. Because the thing is that the variables are constantly changing, like crazy changes. For example, you could have a sweet spot and maybe the cost per clicks didn't go up, maybe the traffic didn't go up, maybe nothing changed, maybe the top competitor dropped their price by $10. We've had that in certain scenarios. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, and everybody starts freaking out, and what the heck? Oh, somebody just decided they're going to take a massive loss for a week because they knew they can get the bestseller batch by doing that. Great on them. Insane tactic. If you can hold your breath, and waste $10 on your price, right? And so that was a good way to start framing the question, in that the ads drive traffic, the listing converts the traffic, right? And to rank, this is a very simplistic and ad-centric way to look at it. There's a lot of different variables, things like conversion rates, etc. But at the end of the day, when it comes to ranking, your ad sales, in some ways, we're talking about validating and making sure that Amazon knows you need a seat at the table. Your ad sales should sort of, I call it like adding to the pot. So it's adding to the cumulative sales you're generating through that search term. Amazon in a lot of ways is a bit agnostic. If you get it from an ad, if you get it from, an organic placement, we don't really care. We just want to know that that shopper path is validated for this product. So what you often see is that you can push advertising. Oftentimes advertising is pushed at a loss, right? Because you're like, okay, I'm ranking this product, right? And then the question is, okay, so once my product is ranked, I'm operating at a loss, and that for any business cannot continue. It's like, how long can you hold your breath, right? So oftentimes what sellers are looking for is like, okay, after I've ranked for like 2 weeks and then I can drop to X amount or pause, and then this is where I'm going to settle. It's not that you couldn't, in theory, have that mathematical model. It's that we don't have all the data points to fully calculate that mathematical model. And Amazon, it is never going to be within their best interest to give us all of that data that is necessary. And so there's a test that we run, right? So we will push for ranking on that keyword and we'll get that product up. And then the question is, how much is this aggressive advertising sustaining this rank? And if I pull back on my aggressive advertising, where does my product, quote, settle? Or, kind of where does it fit within the system? How big of a seat at the table does Amazon believe I am based on my shopper interactions? And can I take away the advertising shopper interactions and still have enough momentum for Amazon to say, yes, this product is phenomenal. When someone searches this search term, people buy this one, right? And so my recommendation is never to go cold turkey. There are some people who shut it off and turn on. But the thing is, if we're trying to figure out where that knob settles to help us be able to sustain some momentum without completely falling off the page and losing everything that we've worked to gain so far, if you just turn it off and on, you don't know where that is. So what you're looking to do is say, can I slowly adjust this? Where can I validate where I land? Up, too far, turn up, no. And that's, so the actions are still more or less, right? It's very binary. That's why bids are one of the most important action pieces. And there is tons of software, scrappy software, robust software, AI enabled software. Everybody's trying to figure out to what degree and how much. And there is insane ecosystems built around, ourselves included as an agency. We have very dynamic optimization models for this, but it's still everybody's trying to figure out to what degree and how much. And the best system that we can find is one that gives enough inputs based on our understanding of the ecosystem and what we deem through our analytics is important. And I think that important in terms of keywords, specific search terms, placements that we need. I think that input needs to have a human eye on the analytics to know this works well, this doesn't. At some point you can leverage analytics, just mathematics to determine that through sheer numbers. And there's also ways where you do need a human eye to say, yeah, the product fits here, right? And then, kind of allow the system to help you settle where we think the point is, but then you also need the other human fail-safe intervention. So when, the competitor lowers their price by $10 and A cost shoots up the roof, conversion rates are down and everything gets screwed up, evaluating where those changes are coming from and going, oh, we just have to, maybe we'll readjust a little bit, but we need to hold our breath for a week because actually turns out this guy does this once a month. And this is just the way it is, but we don't want to overcorrect because if all we looked at was data, we would say this is the conclusion. But if you bring that human analytic element to it, you could say, well, there's also outlying factors. So we need to sort of put a fail safe on the system so we don't overcorrect for something that's out of our control that's going to shoot ourselves in the foot 2 weeks from now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've tested out so many softwares over the years, and some of them are, I think we've all kind of gone down the chain and we have contacts even probably in all these companies, and they all work. It's not that they're bad, they just all have their nuances in terms of how they're run. And I think the final lesson for me is always that you always need a person that is running it at the forefront of it all. Because there's no way that you can tell a machine, I want a 30% ACOS, and here's a couple other parameters, and then done. And then come back in 2 months, and then, oh, what happened, or whatever. No, you need constant management and an eye on that. I also wanted to ask you about campaign structure. So there's software out there. I'm not going to say the name. There are softwares out there that say, okay, you need one keyword, has its own entire campaign. And then you end up looking in your account and you have thousands of campaigns. And I think it's advantageous for the software because you're not going to be able to efficiently manage that. Maybe with spreadsheets if you're good, but it looks messy, especially if you're a novice in your campaign manager to manage all of that. And so, it's designed that way because it is being processed in bulk. And that granularity does give you some level of control, but you're also in some ways potentially splitting yourself a little bit, spreading yourself a little bit too thin, um, because each campaign has its own history, and sometimes that affects other keywords, and
Mhm.
there's all kinds of methods that way. So I'm curious, with your experience, what do you think is really the ideal campaign structure that we can say is like kind of like the blanket structure that you probably would say for most accounts? Obviously, there's going to be some other things that go on depending on the category, the product, and the goal of the client or the SKU. But generally, what would you say campaign structure works the best?
So I'll give you two things that I think I can be very definitive on, and then I'll give you a couple of things that I'm like, it depends. The two things I feel like I can be definitive on for the most part is going to be having one ad group per campaign. I think it has a lot of validity to it. And then also having one product per campaign / ad group, because we're doing single one-to-one. And I do want to define here, when I say product, I mean, I'm talking about a parent ASIN or a listing. There's a very interesting dynamic also in the analytics portion, as well as just the way Amazon treats things between parent-child relationships, that we feel very confident in structuring things that way. And it's worked out really well for us. The more I learn about the analytics, and I had a really great conversation, which I think you had him on the podcast, right? Brian Johnson. I mean, like,
Yeah.
super in the weeds with stuff. We had a conversation that to me really validated a lot of our strategies. I'm not saying he put a rubber stamp of approval. I'm just saying, like, from what he was saying, I was like, okay, I can understand the decision tree, and I feel like, we're on the right track with a lot of things. But so that's like if I've had to give you a quote best structure, I would say that. Now, the piece that everybody in is a hotly debated topic in our industry is how many keywords you put into it, right? You said like single keyword campaigns versus, some people used to have like old school campaigns, right? Where it was like thousands of keywords, just a whole bunch of stuff grouped into one. What I will say is that grouping keywords in a campaign from a performance standpoint. Now, this is like, again, hotly debated in my industry. Like, people are like, oh, no more than like single keyword campaigns all the way, or, no more than 5, or like no more than 10, and, whatever. And there are some people that will argue like, oh, if you have too many keywords in the campaign, like some of them won't get impressions. And so that is a function of, the fact that there's a lot of keywords within that campaign. I haven't seen that to be the case. And I think all of us have seen those campaigns, the old school campaigns of like, there's like hundreds of products in it and there's like thousands of keywords, and yet that campaign is like absolutely crushing it in performance. And it pisses us off to no end as an advertiser, because you're like, I know I can't destroy this.
Yeah.
Because at some point I have to recognize that what is working and I can't screw it up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know this is not the best structure. And it's not necessarily because it's a bad structure in terms of performance. If I went into one of my accounts right now and created a dump campaign of some kind, I can guarantee you on some level, it's going to work really well. The problem is going to be when I want to make adjustments and have very limited amounts that I can control it.
Yep.
So really the way I've come to view it is campaign structure is more about how much do I need control over this, control from an ad spend perspective. Because what we just talked about is that like really good advertising is good delegation of ad spend. So if I want tight control over ad spend, I need a leaner structure. And so that's where I think the single keyword campaigns come in, right? If you had a campaign with, say, or you had a product, you have 100 different variations on it, and you had a keyword that has like 100,000 search volume a month. You're like, okay, I want to go after this, right? Well, with 100,000 search volume, there's a high volume of clicks happening through that one search page, which then means that's going to necessitate a high amount of ad spend, right? You got a lot of clicks. Doesn't matter if you're only paying 10 cents a click. If I got thousands and thousands of clicks, that adds up to a lot of ad spend. So I'm like, okay, this has the potential to spend a lot, right? And I also know I probably need a lot of tight control over it. What we talked about like, okay, ranking and then dialing down the thing, right? I want to be able to turn very specific dials. So the more things I have grouped in there, the less specific I can be with where and when I'm going to dial down that ad spend. And so for that type of structure, I would say, well, even if I have hundreds of different variations, it probably makes sense for me to advertise my best-selling variations, or the ones, you can go say, look at which variation is performing best on that search term, where do I have best conversion rates here, right? So I want to put the best performer in here, so I have tight control over what's appearing. And I also probably want to have tight levels of control over how much budget I'm going to be putting to this. So single keyword campaign makes total sense because I can cap it with my budget and cap it with my bids, and I have lots of control over where I'm spending for this. If I had a keyword with 50, the Helium 10 or something is telling me I have 50 search volume on this, Amazon's not even recognizing it in brand analytics because there's like no traffic, right? To your point of like making it super complicated and I have a ton of different campaigns to look at, doesn't make sense for me to complicate my life because I'm like, I need to minutely control this thing that's going to get one random click every 3 months.
Right.
Probably not, right? And so that's why I think the number of keywords per campaign gets a little bit skewy. And for us, it's like an it's depends. So the it's depends. I mean, like, we as a team and in our agency can run a very complex, very dynamic strategy. Like, I have questions from clients. They're like, oh, why is this? And I'm like, that's an advanced option. I'll let you know how it works. But like, yeah, it's probably not what you're seeing on YouTube, because that's a good basic, kind of broadly applicable strategy. But then we have all like the nuance. Like, if you are paying us to run ads and that's all we do, we probably should have a little bit better strategies than like what's available on YouTube, right?
Of course.
Like, we should be able to move with the punches and be like, okay, so that in this scenario and this and that scenario, and this is where, like those kind of things.
Right.
So I have nothing against where people say like put no more than 5 or no more than 10 keywords and no more than 20 keywords. I don't necessarily have yes, I think if you go all the way to single keyword campaigns, it's a little bit much. And also I think if you go all the way to like everything, just lump it in there, don't worry about it, that's a little bit much. If someone were to come to me and ask me a specific question, I would probably ask like, okay, so what's the search volume? What do you want to control? Is this a ranking keyword? Like, I would kind of go through that decision tree and help them kind of identify what that looks like. So I think for a lot of beginners, it's very comforting to have the no more than 5, no more than 10. But my kind of issue, I think, and why I try and push back against this is I'm old enough in the industry to remember when everyone said no more than 100 keywords, and then they said no more than 50 keywords, and then they said no more than 20 keywords, and then they said no more than 10 keywords, and now it's no more than 5 keywords. And I'm like, why arbitrary round numbers? Why not 15? Why not 15? Why not 9? Like,
yeah.
I'm like, and so I don't necessarily have an issue with it because it's inherently bad. What I have an issue with is when someone analyzes an account and says, oh, you have 100 keywords in this campaign, so therefore your strategy is terrible. I'm like, not necessarily. If you want to blanket apply rules to something because it makes you feel better, great, have at it. But like, don't go through an advanced strategy and try and apply like blanket rules. I'm like, we're better than that. Like, if this is our thing, like, we should be better than that.
Right.
I guess it's
that makes a lot of sense. I think it really does also depend on the scenario. Like you said, everything really depends. But as a rule of thumb, I think that's very fair. You don't want to go too granular because then it gets unreasonable. And you don't want to go too broad and just throw everything in a campaign because then you have no control. So somewhere like finding that sweet middle spot. And I've had situations like that where we come into an account, literally 2 years later, they're like, why is this old campaign still alive? Like, didn't I tell you guys to kill that campaign at the very beginning? And we're like, we tried and it was awful. And then we turned it back on and it was not awful anymore. So
Yeah.
it's like the data told us to keep it on, and just we've made some internal tweaks which you probably don't recognize. But look at the
Mhm.
analytics and look at the numbers, and like we're making it work for you. It just looks like this like Frankenstein zombie thing, So that's just how it
Yes.
works sometimes. That like when the campaign has history, Amazon has like it's an old friend of Amazon's, you can say, right? And you want to throw in
Mhm.
certain keywords into that, even add to it to get some of that reputation, which is back to your theory, and which you validated through data, so have we, which is that PPC is about giving that validity more than
Mhm.
anything else. And rank is a part of it. All these factors are true. They're a part of it. But more than anything, it's proving to Amazon, especially as a launched brand new product, hey, this is something people actually want. We're representing it in a good way with good conversion rates. And so we'll prove to you over and over and over again until you start giving us organic sales and
Yeah.
subscribe and save and external traffic and all of that. So we're getting close on time. I wanted to talk about one more thing. You mentioned advanced strategy. What comes to mind is DSP. And so
Mm.
there's, the whole funnel that you can build now just using sponsored products, sponsored brands, sponsored display, and all of that. But then DSP added to that equation makes it even more advanced. And in some cases, the analytics don't quite pan out. I think that's what we're seeing, and a lot of others are seeing. There's like a kind of
Mhm.
double dipping in a way on the, your DSP analytics look so great, but then actually they're just like taking it from your PPC sales and just saying that they started because they started the process, right? And anyhow, how do you guys utilize DSP, if at all? And what do you say like is the probably the easiest way to get started on DSP if somebody wanted to get involved? Is it, there's the more expensive brand building awareness campaigns that you can make with all these different groups, or there's like the retargeting that you can do, which is like bottom of funnel using audiences if they're big enough. But generally speaking, like with DSP, what do you think is like the easiest, lowest hanging fruit that somebody can kind of engage with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really depends on the thing that we try and filter all of our advertising decisions through, which is what are the brand's goals and what are their constraints? Meaning, for us, goals typically are sales revenue goals. Some brands look at it through numbers of units. So where are you trying to go? And then when I say constraints for us, in a lot of ways, it's total A cost. Now that's specific, obviously, to like, just the traditional on-platform advertising. But it's like, okay, so I want to hit, some brands are aggressive. I want to double, I want to triple. And some brands are, I'm happy with steady year-over-year 10 to 20% growth. Like that's kind of the phase we're in. And those will change based on products as well. When at all possible, we like to get account level as well as product level goals, because those two things feed into each other very nicely, I think. And then, so of course, your constraint is, okay, so you want double, and get you double tomorrow if you're willing to like spend triple, right? Like we can go into negatives and we can grow. And I find that's actually, funny enough, a lot of the ranking questions I get, because a lot of people are like, how do you build ranking campaigns? I'm like, easy, sponsor products, exact match, fixed bids, go hard. All the budgets, like go hard, right? And then that's not actually a satisfactory answer, because the question was, how do I do that and not lose money? That's a more difficult question, right?
Yeah, and that also takes more time.
Right, more time, more nuances. That we're talking about advanced strategies. There's like certain budget strategies we leverage with that. You can't make up for a per conversion rate with advanced strategies, but you definitely can help a lot of things if you know what you're doing. So that feeds into DSP, right? So there's a lot of brands who will come into DSP and say, oh, okay, this is the next level. This is the quote, what I should be doing. Again, kind of like my life philosophy, trying to filter out the noise and saying, okay, what is going to best serve me, right? And so, not that DSP isn't something to be tested, but I think it's something to be evaluated based on your brand goals. So if your brand goal is you want growth, but you really need profitability, cash flow is really tight, you don't have any external, like you're not selling on other retail channels. Like there are some brands who come to us who are selling in other retail channels. Amazon is a small piece of their pie, but it's growing. And they're like, hey, look, we're going to throw 20 grand at the ad budget for only like 4 products. Tell us what the ROAS is at the end of the month, and we're going to benchmark off that. Like there are brands out there who operate like that. And so for them, DSP as like this whole brand growth or awareness strategy is very appealing because they have the cash flow to be able to support that. Their goals support that. Versus, maybe a private labor seller who's done very well for themselves. They've grown into the 6-figure or the 7-figure range. They're pushing up on 8 and they're like, all right, what's my next level? But they're mainly on Amazon. Maybe they're starting to sell on Shopify or other channels. Those really haven't taken off, and Amazon's their bread and butter. Well, if that bread and butter from Amazon is funding a lot of your other external growth projects, like we've had some brands where they take a lot of the profits from Amazon and they're working to build up Shopify, right? That funnel of all that profits is a great long-term play. But if you simultaneously push on your Amazon sales channel and profitability goes down, well, then all of a sudden you're in hot water because you're losing money here and you're losing money here. That's not a sustainable business. So we really try and pull, and a lot of the times the brands, they'll say oh, I want this. Okay, cool. So this is what it takes. No, you really need to start talking. You need that relationship to understand what are the external factors? What does the business look like? What kind of strategies do you need to, and then that will help us consequently make much better long-term decisions. So if you come to me and you say, okay, I would love to exit my business. Great. That means we need a very steady sales rate, and your P&L can't all of a sudden take a massive hit, for 2 months out of this, because that you're looking for that validation of a really solid business. So when you come to me oh, we need to do this really aggressive brand awareness play, and we need to dump all this cash because I want that growth rate, I can come back to you we can do that. We can build you whatever strategy you want, right? What is it going to cost you, and where are you looking to go, and what are you giving up to get there? And if that doesn't make sense, so in the case of DSP, a lot of people think okay, retargeting, and there is some correct, I think, discourse around, well, retargeting is just sort of recycling what I already have. Is it really adding to my top line? Am I just kind of rinsing and repeating? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. I think a lot of people push that button because it, the ROAS is great, right? You're okay, this is awesome, feed more money, right?
Yeah. The hope is the lifetime value.
Right. Yeah. But that also goes back into a more holistic play. So if this number is growing, great. Is this number going, right? What does that look like over time? But if your brand growth, DSP is the next level of that, you have to understand what that investment is going to look like, and that it's not going to be overnight. And if you're okay with that, great, let's start testing it. Our preferred method, when at all possible, I tell all our brands, I'm when left to our defaults, we would prefer incremental tests with enough budget to really validate it, right? I mean, if you get 2 clicks on something, who knows if that worked? If you get 100 clicks, I have more validation, right? So you need enough budget to really be able to validate. But at the end of the day, you don't need to go all in, full charge on everything. I would prefer to say, let's test some budget for learning, and then great, that work. How can we stack wins on top of that? When left to our defaults, that's our preferred method. Now, there are brands who have the budgets or their goals outpace that. And they're that takes too long. I want data yesterday, right? I need that. We're those brands, I think, are less prevalent when you get into sort of the private label space, I think, because a lot of people are they're funding it with the cash flow, and so that sort of strategy becomes difficult. But the brands are out there, and so again, it's having that open dialogue to say, where are you going? How do you want to get there? Is there a way we can build a strategy for that? How do we recommend testing this strategy? And then you just start down that path, and again, you're making micro adjustments. You learn, you're well, that's not going to work. Okay, well, good thing we didn't test it with double the ad budget like you'd requested, just kind of just continuous learning. And then again, you're just trying to build upon what to make it better.
Awesome. Elizabeth, I want to really thank you for all these nuggets of gold that you've shared today. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there that a lot of sellers could really utilize. So hopefully we have some people watching today and in the recording as well, and on social. Do you have any final words that you wanted to share before we close the live stream?
Goodness. Well, hopefully it's been helpful. That is my hope. Yeah, I would say really, I mean, we talked about a lot of things. Depends on where the brand's at. If you're more advanced, come talk to me. We'll talk about advanced strategy. If you're just getting into it and you're hearing all of this, because there are those brands that are starting out and they're like, oh my gosh, DSP and everything in the kitchen sink, and Elizabeth said this and that and advanced, and I'm going to be missing out. If I had to give you a focus, I would say sponsored products by far. I don't care how big your ad budget is. It's going to make up the majority of the ad budget. It makes sense to start there. Focus on getting your keyword targeting and your bid adjustments right. If you focus in on that, that is a good core to build off of, and then you can worry about the advanced strategies. The best ad structure is going to actually be one that's curated by what your budget looks like. So if you're getting in on the ground floor, you're getting in the beginning, you actually don't want the all of the above structure. You want the most targeted, biggest bang for your buck. And that's going to be, again, like sponsored products, focus on your targeting, focus on bid management, and that'll get you really far.
Awesome. Thank you. Elizabeth Greene, jungler.com. Check it out. Thanks everyone for watching. Catch you on the next one.
Thanks so much.
Bye.